Releasing a hype video for the upcoming season that features former Cowboy legends. You're seeing it right here. You got Troy, you got Emmett, you got a whole bunch of current players, some of their current stars, some who I actually had to look up by their number to see who they are. Prominently not featured in this video is Dak Prescott, the quarterback of the football team. And if you think he didn't notice, well, we can tell you his brother most certainly did. His brother Tad, friend of the show, went on Twitter and quote tweeted a story about this with that emoji. So we talked about this yesterday, but we did not get the perspective of the of Dominique Foxworth, whose face is worth 1,000 words. Neek, your reaction.
All right, I'm going to try to stay calm because this makes me very angry. So first of all, I'm not going to assume that Jerry Jones gets signed off on these type of hype videos. So I'm not going to extrapolate a whole bunch of other narrative out of this, but we cannot in no way look at this as anything other than a slight and disrespect. I'm sure that plenty of people saw this, and I think that they're potentially is an aura around the organization that does not value him as much as they should, and I absolutely do not understand why. Like, let me do this for you. This is an easy hype video to make. You know what you do? You start at some sneakers, or no, you start at some cleats, and then you pan slowly up, and you just let the beat play. Guess who's Bizak's playing in the background? You bring it all the way up, and then you lock it on the silhouette of a man. And then light comes on, and it says, guess who's Dak? Cowboys 2021. That's the video. He is your team. He is the only reason why you've been respectable up until this point. That is very simple. You do that, the only other option of a video is maybe you have Dak throwing the ball, and the ball is actually Dak's head to another guy who looks like Dak catching the ball, and then there's some people kick sliding with Dak heads on them, blocking it, and then I want the camera to go in on the middle of the field where the star is, and no, not a star. It's Dak Prescott's face, and you go straight and you zoom until you get to Dak's eye, and then you go into his eye, and inside his eye is another damn Dak Prescott, and you keep doing that for a loop of 35 minutes because he is the only man in the entire organization who freaking matters, and I'm so happy I said freaking right there because I promise you, Michael Robinette Greenberg and something else almost came out.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to let RC respond and get Graziano's thoughts as we continue, but that was exactly what we needed. Look at some franchises and figure out what they should do. Hey, my former Steeler, Ryan Clark, should the Steelers rebuild it or run it back?
They got to rebuild it. When you look at this offense, it's lost an identity. There's no physicality. There's no run game. And you have a quarterback that's beyond his prime. And so if you want to start looking to getting into the Super Bowl window again, you have to start from scratch. Build up front, find a quarterback of the future, and more than certainly find a running game and a premier runner.
Yeah, 11-0 this season, and you saw how it wound up. Neat. Cowboys, rebuild it or run it back?
You got to run it back. I mean, you have a great quarterback. You don't damn deserve him, but you got him, and you're the only one in the division who has a real, reliable, Pro Bowl, all-pro level quarterback. So you got to run it back. You got to put together a patchwork defense and try to make this team good enough to compete while you have a quarterback. I hope he gets out of there.
We have more on Dak coming up in a few minutes, but let me get to Seattle.
So
Mike T. Seahawks, rebuild or run it back?
I'm rebuilding the defense. When you think about the great Seahawks teams, the Legion of Boom, it was always on the defensive side of the ball. They haven't been able to rush the passer. L.J. Collier, first-round pick, hasn't really panned out. Bruce Irvin, I think he's done. And on the back end, they couldn't get off the field on third down. They got to rebuild the defense and keep Russell Wilson in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, they traded away 2 first-round picks for a safety last year, and yet the defense did not get much better. Meanwhile, speaking of Seattle, more from Russell Wilson. He went on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and he offered these thoughts on having more say in personnel decisions. Listen.
You know, I think that ultimately, for me personally, I think that I want to be able to be involved because at the end of the day, it's your legacy, it's your team's legacy, it's the guys you get to go into the huddle with. And at the end of the day, those guys you got to trust.
Are you involved in personnel decisions? Have you been involved in personnel decisions?
Not as much. I don't, I think that, For
Do you
me,
want to be involved, Russ?
Yeah, I think it helps. I think it helps to be involved more. But I think that dialogue should happen more often, in my opinion.
It really does feel like a new era in the National Football League, doesn't it? We talked about Russell earlier in a different context, but this, I think, is a bigger picture topic. Dan Graziano, I have people, it feels to me, like are saying constantly, the NFL is turning into the NBA with the way the stars are taking so much control over what happens in their careers and for their teams. Is that an accurate way of summing up the situation in football right now?
Yeah, I think it's a simplified way of doing it, but it is accurate to some degree. Look, I mean, you have guys that have forced their way out of situations they didn't like via trade. You have Deshaun Watson trying to do it now at the highest level in terms of a quarterback, but the more it happens, I mean, these guys watch the NBA and follow the NBA, and they say to themselves, why not? Why, if James Harden can do it, then why can't I? And so I think it will continue. The owners obviously hate it and hope that it doesn't continue down this path, but the players, especially the ones that are high profile and make a lot of money, feel like they have leverage. And they are right to an extent that their predecessors really never understood or at least activated.
Or at least never really had the leverage or clout or ability to do. I think that's an important part of this. And so that is why I really wanted to talk to Dominique about this, not only as a former player, but in your capacity having been the president of the NFL Players Association. I know how strongly you feel about players being able to take control of their situations. I get that part of it. But let's not deal in that. Let's deal in whether in the big picture it is good or bad for the sport that these sort of things happen. Can you remove the player's hat and answer that question independently?
I mean, I obviously have some biases, and it's hard for me to remove those biases, but I'll do the best I can. I think that if the owners have a problem with it, it's because it puts pressure on them. And that pressure is only going to make them better. Like, I don't understand how the product gets worse if someone is holding you accountable. That's something that always makes things better. So if you're mad that your quarterback wants to leave or your star player wants to leave, don't look at them and call them disloyal or be upset about not being able to control it. Look at yourself and ask the question, why am I failing here? What about me what about this place is so bad that I can pay this person hundreds of millions of dollars and they're like, know what? Keep it. I need to get out of here. So that's the first way that it makes it better. And the other way that I think that it makes it better is something that you brought up, Greeny. This is not basketball. Basketball is positionless in a way that it allows you to stockpile superstars. There's only one quarterback. Nobody is going to go be a backup quarterback because they want to play, because Russell wants to play with Aaron Rodgers. Like, it'll never happen. And I think it adds to the intrigue of the offseason. It makes it exciting. And we saw something similar to that, I guess, take place down in Tampa Bay. When Tom Brady went there, the available stars, they weren't superstars, but the available stars that were out there wanted to go there. And who can say that what happened this year was bad for football? I think it's crazy.
Right. The most important point I would agree with, it doesn't compromise competitive balance as it has in basketball, and that's a problem. RC, ultimately, is it good or bad for the sport?
I think it's good. If you're a Los Angeles Rams fan, are you excited that you have Jalen Ramsey? If you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, are you excited that you have Jamal Adams? You absolutely are. And if you're the team that gets Deshaun Watson, are you not going to throw a party? And if you have somewhere to put a boat parade, do that as well. You absolutely are. Like, this game is now different, but it's not basketball. You know, basketball is like, hey, I'm AD. I'm tired of being in New Orleans. It ain't really for me. I want to go to LA. You know, Jalen Ramsey's in a situation where he sat in front of people and they demeaned him and they made him feel inferior. Jamal Adams was in a situation in New York. Well, hell, Greeny, I ain't got to explain New York to you. You know exactly what it is. And then you look at Deshaun Watson and what he's dealing with the Houston Texans. Russell Wilson isn't saying that he wants to leave. He isn't saying that he's demanding anything. He just said, you know what, that dialogue would be nice. And I agree. There were countless times Coach Tomlin didn't necessarily include me in personnel decisions, but he said, hey, RC, when you were playing so-and-so, how did you feel about him? When you've watched this defensive player on film, is he a Pittsburgh Steeler? Is this a guy that you'd like to play with? And I think that's all Russell Wilson is asking for. Russell Westbrook has a saying, and it's why not Russ? I think now Russell Wilson is saying, why not Russ?
It's a very interesting
news right now. I didn't know that you was a part-time GM while also being a superstar safety. Oh, I didn't know that. Congratulations,
Here's the
Super Bowl champion executive.
Here's one thing, Neek, that I want to come back to later in the show. And that is, I say this as the father of a teenage sports fan. In basketball, he doesn't have a team. The one thing that he doesn't have that I had growing up, that we all had growing up, he doesn't have a team that I can see Graziano nodding. He doesn't have a team that he roots for. He roots for individual players, and football has never been that way. And I wonder if that's what we're about to come to. Very quickly, Mike Tannenbaum, I didn't get you in here. Let me get a quick thought from you.
Well, there's a time and place to get input from players. So when we had coaching searches, I asked Chad Pennington, I asked Ryan Tannehill to meet with candidates. They appreciated it, but I made it very clear they weren't making the decision, but we wanted to hear their feedback. When we traded for Brett Favre, we got his input on a couple players, and in a respectful way, we either acted on it or didn't. It's a really fine line, but with certain players, you're going to get the most out of them when they feel like they're part of the process.